All right. So, how to get out of your own way, right? So this has been my biggest issue when it comes to self-improvement is actually just being my own worst enemy, being my own limitations, right? My own blockages, my own my own problems, right? So a lot of my struggle with self-improvement hasn't involved the self-improvement, hasn't involved the challenges associated with that, hasn't involved the pain associated with that, but rather just the challenges that my own mind creates, that I create for myself, right? All of the difficulties that I impose onto myself, rather than the difficulties that come along with self improvement. I actually find these very easy to overcome, right? But the difficult one is this right here is the mind, right? So a lot of us struggle with this. A lot of us struggle with overcoming the mind and actually becoming the master of our own minds because our minds have become so powerful over the years. Our minds have gained so much influence over us by creating these false senses of reality that we rely upon in order to feel comfortable, in order to feel whole, feel like ourselves, right? We attach to a specific scenario, specific emotion, specific set of thoughts, right? A specific habit maybe, and our brain attaches to these things and will fight tooth and nail in order to maintain these things, right? And this is the biggest problem that we come up on when we are doing self-improvement is actually just overcoming these mental attachments, the mind's desire to stay comfortable and stay doing what it is already associated with, right? The mind doesn't like change, but as we know, when it comes to self-improvement, change is everything. Change is self-improvement. So we need to learn how to overcome this. We need to learn how to shut off the mind. We need to learn how to cancel out its limiting beliefs and cancel out all of these mental attachments and these mental frameworks that are keeping us stuck. So why are you letting your own mind stop you? Is the first question. What is it that is stopping you from overcoming your mind and becoming the master, and why is your mind so powerful, right? Why is your mind able to keep you stuck like this? So negative thought loops, negative thought feeling loops, right? So if you've read Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza, he talks about these. So negative or positive thought feeling loops. Basically, when we have a thought, let's say it's a memory of the past. Let's say it's an anxious memory, right? So I'll just use an example. Let's say I have a memory of myself from a few years ago that's really embarrassing, right? That I don't like to look back on. My mind will bring that memory up, will bring that thought up, right? And that thought, because the body doesn't know the difference between a thought and an actual experience, right? So the body is going to react to the thought the same way it would if it were actually there, right? So it's going to create all of the emotions. It's going to release all of the necessary hormones to feel the same emotions now in the moment that we're thinking about it as we did back when we actually experienced it. And so our mind will do this constantly. If there's a specific habit you have, your mind is doing this with that habit. It brings up the thought of the habit, and that triggers the craving for it. That triggers the body to release all of the necessary hormones that would make you feel like you want the drug or let's say it's your phone, right? Let's say you're trying to get away from the phone. Your mind is going to create this sense of stress, of FOMO, like there's something missing, right? And then you're going to feel the craving of wanting to fill that lack of something, right? And then you go to your phone and you're scrolling on social media in order to fill that hole, that gap, right? That gap is just a feeling created by the mind, by the thoughts within the mind. And so when we start to learn about these thought feeling loops, when we start to become aware of them, we can start to change them, right? And these thought feeling loops do determine our reality. They determine our experience, right? What are the three things that creates a reality that determines who you are, right? That's your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, right? So the thought feeling loop controls two of them, and typically as a result, the action, the third portion of that, is a byproduct. So when you have an aligned thought and an aligned feeling, you will typically follow up with the aligned action, right? And this is good or bad, whether this is a negative thought, feeling, and action, or positive thought, feeling, and action, right? Either way, the thoughts and the feelings combine, and that creates internal alignment. And then with that internal alignment, we will be able to go and actually take aligned action, and this will start to initiate the process of creating that experience, creating that reality that we're either looking to experience or that we've been experiencing, right? If this is a negative thought loop, this is something you've just been experiencing, and it'll continue to happen over and over again. It's just very subtle, right? At this point in your addiction, you probably don't notice. It's probably very subtle when your mind actually thinks about the drug, right? And then you feel the craving. By the time you feel the craving, you've already figured out how to do it, right? So you are following this loop without that gap of observing the thought and then observing the feeling that comes up and then observing the actions taken. You are simply reacting to the thought, feeling, and actions, right? So the next thing is resistance, right? When we face resistance, we tend to, our minds at least, tend to try to stop us, tend to try to put themselves in our way, right? So when we're on self-improvement, for example, a lot of what we're doing here takes us pushing through resistance. It requires us to go and push through, push beyond the resistance, push beyond our limitations. Our minds, in the state that they're in, do not like this because we are not the master of our mind. Our mind is their master, and so therefore it tries to keep us comfortable, right? It tries to keep us safe. It tries to keep us contained, right? And so this can make it harder for us to actually get on to self-improvement, get on to our new routine, for example, start a business, because the resistance that we face in the beginning is enough for our mind to try to divert us. It tries to divert our attention away from the thing that's difficult because it wants to stay comfortable. It wants to stay in its comfort zone. And then the last thing is actually feeling lost. So when we feel like we are lost, when we don't know our direction, our mind doesn't know where to go. Our mind isn't sure whether it should sit down and push through the resistance, or if it should go and seek comfort, or if it should be contemplating and deciding on what's next, right? If we feel lost, right, if we don't know our direction, our mind is also going to be lost. It's going to be directionless, right? And so by default, when we do feel lost, our mind is going to direct us and divert us towards comfort. It's going to divert us straight towards comfort, straight towards what we already know, right? Straight towards our already known routine. And so, so the feeling of being lost, just as we thought about with the thought-feeling loop, is going to trigger your inability to find your direction. And so the best thing you can do is actually sit with this feeling, right? Instead of going and doing the distracting activity because you don't know what else to do, because you seek comfort, right? Just sit with the feeling of not knowing where you're going, and eventually you will find your way, right? The brain will process what it needs to process, and you will find your way. And that brings us into the next section, how to find your way, right? So the first thing is actually meditation and sitting in solitude. So similar to what I just said, doing more meditation throughout the day and just sitting alone with yourself in thought. There's another point about journaling, but during this process I would sit with the journal as well and just kind of sit with yourself, sit with your thoughts and journal, and then just write and kind of come up with the direction you want to go, come up with where you've been, why you're stuck, right? Start to see these things on paper and start to really process them in here. And over time, you will eventually be able to find your way, right? You will eventually be able to kind of lose this directionless mindset and this free-floating mindset, and you will have a clear direction, you will have a clear purpose. So meditation and sitting in solitude is going to be a way for you to sit with your mind, as well as, so what's going to happen while you're sitting is your mind is going to come up with other things for you to do. Your mind is going to come up with the distractions. It's going to urge you to do something, and that something is usually one of your distractions, right? And so what we want to be doing is observing this, and we want to be becoming aware of this, right? We want to be seeing it for what it is and gaining awareness of it. And then from there, what we will be able to do is change it. From there, what we will be able to do is dissolve the thought, dissolve the feeling, and then change it, shift it, right? So another thing is going to be journaling specifically about where you want to go in life, right? So journal about the person that you want to be. Journal about the direction that you want to go, what you want to create, the life you want to be living, right? And do this in detail, right? I would even sit for 30 minutes to an hour and just write for that whole time about who you want to become, where you want to go, what you want to be, right? And so what this will do is, again, it will just give you more direction. It'll give you more clarity on where you're going. And when you have that awareness of where you want to go, then it just becomes easy to actually go and move in that direction, right? Because what's happening when you're in your own way, when you are your own worst enemy, when you are your own limitation, right? This is just because you either doubt yourself, right? You either don't have faith in yourself. You either don't have hope for yourself. You don't have faith in yourself, right? So you don't have self-belief. You don't have self-confidence, right? You do not think you are worthy of getting there. Or you are afraid of the success. You are afraid of where you are headed, right? Or you just don't know. Or you just don't know where you're going. And all three of these things will be fixed if you clearly defined where you're going and looked at that and observed that. And then maybe, let's say it's self-confidence that you're struggling with. If you can see where you want to go, it's easier for you to put yourself there. It's easier for you to put yourself in that position. And so over time, you'll be able to develop the self-confidence. Does that make sense? And then so the last thing we have here is just going to be starting to work on smaller things, starting to work on anything that will make progress, in the right direction, or anything that will help you to clear any energy, clear the mental space, the mental frame, right? So one of my favorite activities to do when I'm in a rut is to clean my room. Why? Because when I clean my room, it clears my head. When I clean my room, it clears my mind, and when I can clear my mind, then I can sit down and clearly figure out what the fuck I'm going to do now, right? I'm stuck. I've been stuck. How am I going to get myself unstuck? You can only really sit down and clearly think about this if you have a clear headspace, right? And typically, if you're in a rut, you don't. So doing an activity like cleaning your room is going to help with that. Doing any activity, it doesn't even have to be cleaning your room. But just doing small activities that will get you closer will show you that you're capable of doing it, and so therefore will allow you to kind of let off a little bit, allow yourself to just go, just flow, just do what needs to be done, right? Instead of constantly trying to force and constrict and control everything, right? So when we see that we're actually capable of achieving the things we want to achieve, even if it's little tiny small tasks, we start to have more self-belief, and we start to lose that sense of doubt, right? We lose the sense of doubt for ourselves. And so therefore, we actually are able to move forward because we have the confidence to do so. So controlling the mind is going to be the next thing we're going to talk about. Just how to gain control of this right here, the mental space, the mental plane. And the mind is a complicated thing, right? It's a very complex organism. I mean, I was going to say piece of machinery, but we are not machines. But it is comparable to a computer. I believe that our mind is stronger than any supercomputer, any AI we could ever create, right? And so it is not only essential to gain control of this, but if we didn't gain control of this, it could be detrimental. So observing and dissolving negative thoughts is going to be the first thing we do here. So we have to, before we can even dissolve them, before we can do anything about them, dissolve, transmute, however you'd like to view it, first we have to observe. First we have to actually find the thoughts that we don't like. We have to find the thoughts that don't align. And from here, we will now be able to actually dissolve them. We will now be able to transmute them. So observing, you can do this in meditation, but you also will want to do this throughout the day, right? Every time thoughts come up, you want to be aware of them. Every time you have thoughts about something positive or something negative, you want to be aware of it. You want to see it. You want to hear it. You want to view it. You want to feel it. You want to see where it came from, right? You want to observe where that thought came from, what triggered that thought. And you want to start to break down the identification with certain thoughts, right? The identification with certain feelings. And you do this by first becoming aware and then observing, and as you as you observe, you will start to pull consciousness from the thoughts, from the mind, back to yourself. So you will turn the thought, you will turn the feeling and the energy in the thought loop, right? You will start to transform it back into raw consciousness, back into yourself. And then from here, we will create our own thought loops. We will create our own thought feeling loops. So keeping your focus on the present moment is going to be the next thing. So one exercise I like to do is actually just putting my awareness from the mind, because typically we have awareness in two spaces, right? So I can even say this right now. Half of my awareness is here, right? Half of my awareness is in the present moment. About half of my awareness is up here in the mind, actually. And what I would like to do right now, what I'm doing currently, is trying to pull my consciousness that's in my mind down into my body instead, into the inner body. Allow yourself to be anchored into the inner body. And allow yourself to be more in the present moment. Because from the present moment, our consciousness and our attention is what has control. When we are in the mind, our mind has control. But when we are here, our mind is simply a tool. Our mind simply has to follow orders. Our mind simply has to follow our consciousness, where our attention goes. And so when we're in the present moment, we gain control back because we are able to just be present. We are able to just be aware. And when we move our awareness to the things we want to do, rather than the things we don't, rather than getting stuck in the mind about it, we just consciously and presently put our attention here, our mind starts to move in that direction. And so by staying in the present moment and then just keeping your consciousness on where you want to go, your mind will naturally dissolve what doesn't need to stay and will create whatever needs to be created in order for you to move in that direction. And then the last thing is going to be overcoming the mind's resistance. So when the mind throws resistance at you, you have to be able to overcome that resistance, right? And by overcoming this resistance, we are training our minds, teaching our minds that we are in control, that we are the masters, not the mind. And so the mind will throw resistance, like when I want to sit down and work, for example. This happened today. When I wanted to sit down and work, my mind came up with a couple reasons why I shouldn't. It started to make me think about the other things that I would like to do, right? And this is a form of resistance. This is the form of the mind trying to say, hey, I'm not sure I want to do this. I want to do something else, right? And what did I do? I focused on this and I did it, right? I overcame that little bit of resistance. And so now my mind has settled. My mind isn't fighting this anymore. Instead, it's more effective for my mind to actually help me with the video, help me make a better video than continue to get in my way. But initially, you will have that resistance. And then once you overcome said resistance, that's when you will start to gain control again. And then so my last section is going to be learning how to be, right? Learning how to be present, be in the moment, right? So the first thing is going to be being present with everything that you're doing, whatever you are doing. So if that is watching YouTube, right? That is sitting on your ass eating chips. if that is eating a good meal, a big meal, right? Eating food. If that is playing sports, if that's when you're at school, right? If you're on a bus ride somewhere, right? Always be present. Always be in the moment. Even if it's a boring thing, always be present and in the moment. It's okay to think. It's okay to use the mind, but only to the extent that you really need, right? We should not be always in the mind. We should most of the time, majority of the time, be present, be in the moment, right? And so what this will do is this will just teach you how to be more present. It'll teach you how to be more aware of things, aware of what is actually happening in reality. And this will give you a better ability to determine the difference between your mind and its resistance, the mind and its resistance versus you and versus your actual reality, what you are actually experiencing, right? And then, so next we have relax. Don't tense up so much. Kind of let yourself flow. Let things go. Release all of the tension, all of the need for control, needing to, like I said, control everything, needing to be in control, needing to force everything, right? Let go of the tension. Release all the tension. Stop creating tension. Stop creating mental tension. Stop creating physical tension. Just relax. Release. Let go, right? And what this will do is this will actually allow you to, as you relax, you will start to flow better. Things will flow to you easier, right? You will flow through things easier. You will flow through the work that has to get done a lot easier and a lot faster, right? You will be able to align with the gifts that you want faster and quicker, right? So the last thing I have is just flow state. So actually being in a flow state. The more you enter flow state and the more you maintain flow state, the more control you will have over your mind, as well as what will happen is the more you are in flow state, the more you will actually begin to crave the work, because flow state is the optimal human experience. And so when we are in flow state, right, there's nothing in our way. We are not in our own way anymore, because we just are. We are present fully with the task at hand, and we are just flowing through that activity. And the more we are in that state, the more we are used to it, the more we can access it, and the easier we can access it, as well as the easier we will be able to identify when we're stopping ourselves, because the state of flow is the state of no resistance, no internal resistance, no internal blockages, right? And so when we understand and feel and perceive this state more and get used to this state, now when something like my mind trying to resist something or stop me from doing something comes up, I can identify it and I can see it. But anyways, so that's the video. That's all I have for you. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, if you'd like to see more like this, hit the subscribe button. But yeah, that's it. Peace.